Hi everybody, this is Mark from We Talk Art, and I am in Ortonville, Michigan, a small town just north of Detroit, and I am inside the Leaning Barn studio, which is the studio of a friend of mine, Amelia Currier. She is an artist that I respect immensely. I'm getting the opportunity to talk to her about her art career, the things that inspire her in art, and also the challenges and successes she's had moving back to her home state of Michigan after many years being away and trying to reestablish herself as an artist in the art scene here in Michigan, while at the same time trying to grow as an artist nationally. So I think there's a lot of inspiring information in this talk, and so let's roll the intro and get into it. Amelia Currier, thank you so much for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
So we met originally in the Truckee River Gallery and somewhere around the 2009 time period.
Yeah.
And at the time you were working primarily in printmaking. And that's kind of the way I knew you initially. But I know that you are, as many artists are, very multifaceted, and you've grown tremendously since 2009.
That was a long time ago.
It was. It seems like a long time. I mean, COVID makes everything pre-COVID look like a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I would like you to kind of go in and tell us a little bit about your journey. And you can go back as far as you want and just kind of tell us what, because I think it's interesting because printmaking then, but now you're doing something completely different.
When I lived in Detroit, my degree was in Intaglio Printmaking. And it's interesting now because I'm working with metal and glass and wood. But what drew me to printmaking was that I was working on metal, which seems kind of odd because it's about the printing, but that was what I was fascinated by. Yeah. So anyway, around 2009, I did have a press and I printed, but then I got tired of the chemicals and the technical. It was just too technical. I was tired of that. So that's when I moved into encaustic monotype, where you can print without a press per se, a traditional press. So I did that for about 10 years. Right around that time, I moved to Michigan. I did the encaustic monotypes for quite a while.
When did you move to Michigan?
It was 8 years ago.
Okay, so it was pre-COVID.
2014.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah. So when I moved here, a lot of things conflagrated. My partner is a sculptor. We bought this old barn that we're sitting in now, so we had all this wood lying around, and I was, my whole life had changed, the whole trajectory of my lifestyle, and so I just started playing with the wood. I learned how to use a bandsaw and all that fun stuff, and I was really intrigued with it, and it actually makes me think of when I was talking to my mom about it. I said, man, all of a sudden now I'm a sculptor and I'm just making all this crazy shit. And she said, when you were a little girl, a baby, she would get out all the pots and pans and put them on the floor, and I would turn them into little sculpture things. And she said I would just do that for hours. So I think I innately like to build. And I didn't know that that was sort of a buried desire. So
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. True story.
Okay.
Yeah. So these I refer to as my forest of dignitaries. So I think of them as live creatures. So just bear with me. So I started making them by just using a piece of walnut, and then I collected all these found objects and I changed each one. I either melted it, burned it, pounded it. Some of these are old pewter teacups and things like that. This was a pewter bowl that I melted, bent it in half, and turned it into what I think of as the bloom at the top of the tree. So these are trees. This is called the tree of the arcane. And these are just my newest little creatures that I'm having fun with. So this piece was inspired by Zulu warrior shields because they have an abstraction that is purely a result of the function of putting the leather on the shield. But I thought it was just so beautiful. And then I liked the idea of a shield itself. So I secretly think of this as my bullshit shield. It kind of guards me from all the bullshit in the world. But it's 3 panels. I burned them, drilled holes in them, and then this piece is cast resin, and that's cast resin also. So it's called Ishu Langu Shield, which is what the Zulus call their shield.
So it's my understanding that you study a bit of art history. It's kind of had an influence on you. And so how do you think that has impacted your art throughout your art career?
Well, my knowledge of art history is kind of eclectic. I mean, I've been to Japan, and I have a real kinship with Japanese aesthetics, and because that's all based on nature and change and decay and the whole wabi-sabi thing. And so I have studied Japanese aesthetics, but back when I was going to school, I went to the Boston Museum School, and back then conceptualism was a big thing. And at the school, it was interesting. The New York artists, the big shots, would come to the school, and they were our teachers. So one of them was Vito Acconci, who was known for, he would take like 30 or 40 vinyl records of Beethoven's symphonies, and he would melt them. And that was a thing back then.
Yeah.
But at the age of 19, I thought, wow, that's pretty fucking cool, because I was more in abstract expressionist mode, which is what I learned more about from my mother and my high school teacher. And so that kind of opened up my mind to the fact that anything goes. So that was I would say that was a big part of my art history education.
Before the show, you talked about an early boyfriend that was an artist, and it feels like it kind of set you, at least in your approach to art, from a discipline level.
Yeah. So his name was Gordon Newton, and he and Michael Lukes and Robert Sestock were probably the triumvirate of what's called the Caste Corridor art movement from the 70s. So I met him when I was a senior in high school. I used to go down to Detroit and go to the Stop the War. Oh my God. Anyway, so we got very involved, and because I was so young and I grew up in the suburbs, even though my mother was an artist, his way of approaching being an artist had a huge impact on me. I mean, I remember he would work on something for days, and if he didn't like it, he'd throw it out the window, or he would just destroy it. He was kind of a madman, but he worked hard, and he had nothing. He didn't have a car. He lived in a studio. He really didn't have enough to eat even. So at the time, Sam Wagstaff was the curator at the Detroit Art Institute. He was Robert Mapplethorpe's lover. So but that's another story. Anyway, he took Gordon under his wing, and so he sort of supported him. So then Gordy had a foot up. But anyway, from him, I learned that you believe in your talent and what you have and what you can achieve, no matter what. So that was an important lesson for me. Kind of a hard lesson, but it was an important one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things, this is a question that I didn't warn you about, but you live in a stunning place. And I was just curious if nature and this place is that you draw energy from that, you draw
Oh yeah.
inspiration from that,
Yeah.
and I know that part of your sculptural now is wood, and you tend to bring that wood down to pretty raw things, burning it and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, they're pretty
Um,
elemental.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say the number one influence of my work is nature. I mean, I study how nature forms. Like I did a whole series called Coneflower series based on the growth of a coneflower, and I made a bunch of found object cone shaped. I don't have any of them in here, but anyway, a lot of my work is just based on the evolution of natural course of life and death and rotting, decay and growth and rebirth. And so, I see that around me all the time because we have this woods out there and the creek. And so I would say that's my number one influence comes from nature,
Hmm.
actually. Yeah.
And then another thing that I've noticed in your work over time is that there's certain elements that tend to repeat, even from your very early work
Mm-hmm.
when you were doing printmaking, and then some of your monotypes, and then seems to be showing up in your sculptural work. And
Uh-huh.
it's the circles that we talked about,
Yeah.
and the structure, and the
Mm-hmm.
repetition of elements, but there's also a form to it too that
Mm-hmm.
um, I I see it throughout your work. And
Mm-hmm.
is that something that you believe is consciously put in, or do you think that that is something that's somewhat unconscious? And I want to preference, when we were downstairs, you were talking about turning off your brain. Sometimes you get some of
Right,
your best
right.
work by not
Yeah.
thinking, but do you
Yeah.
have, can you
Well,
elaborate on that?
yeah, I think the circles in some cases they're actual just holes in the wood. I do a lot of drilling, and to me that's kind of just a metaphorical decay feeling to it, but I'm also putting air in something that's solid. So I see the hole as a form of light, if that makes sense. So there's that, but I also see it as a medium of decay. But in my work on paper, I do a lot of dot forms too, and I think that's just because the circle or the oval is just an elementary shape. There's the Enso circle that the Japanese do, the circle of life, eggs are circles, circles are everywhere. So I see that as kind of a universal symbol. So I think that's why I'm drawn to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that.
So, yeah.
The you had mentioned the wabi sabi some time ago. I read several books on it, and there were several things that I took away from it. But I remember being really intrigued by the Japanese tea ceremony, which kind of is
Mm-hmm.
at the heart of it. Is the path of uneven stones and the small room
It's
and the,
very elegant and
yeah.
quiet, and that's another aspect of my work is that I want to give the viewer some kind of transcendence. I want it. You and I were talking about this earlier that I would never want to dictate anything about what the work is about. I want it to be, in a way, kind of neutral, so that when you look at it, you're seeing a reflection of yourself. So I even my titles I keep pretty neutral because I don't want to feed anybody at all as far as what their interpretation of the work is.
Okay.
So yeah.
So want to take a little bit of a switch now, because you a while back, 8 years ago, you moved back to Michigan, your home state,
Mm-hmm.
and I've, through Debbie and our conversations, you've it's been somewhat challenging, and I know that to reestablish as an artist in a new location, even when you've been absent from the location for a while, is challenging. But at the same time, you're trying to establish yourself nationally as an artist.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about your approach to that and your challenges
Well,
and what's...
it has been challenging because we live in this little village, you know, and so there is essentially no artist community here to speak of. So my artist community is pretty much social media or my old friends from Detroit. But granted, you know, I knew them 40 years ago, and a lot of them, like Gordy and Michael Lukes, are dead now. So it's kind of I mean, I have some street cred in Detroit because everybody remembers me from the old days, but it doesn't really get your foot in the door in a gallery, even though they kind of know who you are. So it's taken me quite a while for this other generation in Detroit to get to know me again. So it has taken a while. Most of my sales and my interactions are on Instagram, to be honest, you know. Although I have shows in downtown Detroit. I work in shows down in Detroit too.
And you have discussions with other galleries, so
yeah.
hopefully we'll see some more getting out of the area.
So to answer your question about the challenges, I mean, I don't want to bitch and moan, but really,
oh, you can.
We're
amongst
for
friends
those of
here.
you out there that are trying to get your work out, you have to push and push and push and push. You got to do it all. You got to write the letters. You have to be diplomatic. You have to be patient. You have to be judicious about which galleries you're going to contact. I mean, it's a multi-layered kind of job with no rule book, no guidebook. You can buy all those books and watch the videos, but really all it's about is working every day and just promoting your work the best way you can and not giving up.
I talk with a lot of young artists and I tell them that being an artist is the hardest job in the world.
Really?
Yes, and the reason is because you can go to school for the craft, but you can't go to school for how to sell work.
No.
No one teaches that. And the artists that do see success hold that information pretty close to the vest. And even if you got someone to tell you their formula, it's not necessarily repeatable.
No.
And even if you see that some success with your work, it doesn't mean that just doing the same thing again will repeat it. You're constantly reinventing yourself in order to stay up with whatever trends and visual styles that are popular at the time. So
yeah, that's another challenge too, because you have to maintain your integrity. Like right now I have this gallery that's interested in me and they love my ink gestures. So I thought, well, I don't like working on command, but on the other hand, it would be nice to have my work out there. So you have to kind of, you know,
and they're amazing. So I know that's not.
So it's a tricky balance, though, to try to sell your work but not sell your soul, and just keep at it.
So, is there anything else you'd like to add? Something that we haven't covered that kind of is on your mind?
Well, since I'm a veteran artist now, if anyone listening to this is a younger artist, the advice that I would give you is to never give up and always be honest to yourself about what you're trying to say. Don't let that little voice come in that says, nobody's gonna like that, or nobody's gonna understand that, or what are you doing? Just be really honest about what you wanna put out there. And I think people respond to truth. They know when you put your heart and soul in your work, they know it. They can feel it.
Yeah.
So that's my advice. Be honest.
So you're one of my first interviews, and I wanted to add 3 questions at the end, and this list is still a little under development. You actually just answered the first question, which is what was the one thing you would tell a new artist?
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Don't quit.
Be true to
Be true to
yourself
yourself
and never give up.
So I warned you of this one earlier when I wasn't sure how you were going to deal with it, but do you see that there's a dominant force that's affecting the art world right now? Is there?
You mean besides social media and the double-edged sword of social
I think that's a
media?
strong and valid one, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I was telling you, I have a few friends from all over the world that I chit chat with that are other artists, and we give each other support, and it's meaningful even though I've never met them.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps you feel connected with the rest of the art world. On the other hand, you see these people who are trying to pull you into their, I can help you sell your artwork in 5 minutes and everything's all fa la la, and that's just utter garbage.
Yeah.
So.
And you want to be polite, but it's like, go away.
Yeah, yeah. So you got to be careful with the social media, not to get too dependent on it.
So the last question is there an artist that either heavily influences you or that you follow on social media that you would recommend to other artists to follow because of some aspect of what they're doing?
Well, I can think of dead artists who I follow.
That's fine.
Like my favorite artist, I have a bunch, like Paul Cézanne is one of them, but Cy Twombly, whose work is often misunderstood. People often that don't understand art will say any kindergarten could do that because his work is very scrawly. Mm-hmm. But his work is an example of work that is just brutally honest, and you feel it when you look at his work. Mm-hmm. So I sort of use him as a measure of what my own work is. I have a lot of respect for his work, but he's gone now. So, yeah.
Someone they should be able to look up and see some of that work and read something about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Cy Twombly.
Well, yeah. I will put in the show notes a link to Amelia Currier's work on her website. She also has an active Instagram, and I'd highly recommend you following her there. And feel free to ask questions in the show notes, and I will pass them to Amelia and see if we can get answers from that. And thanks for watching. And remember, all the buttons to show your love are down below, and that subscribe button helps us out a lot. So if you want to hit that, it's free. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.